Everyone thought they knew Matt Lauer's story. The face of morning television for over 2 decades, he sat behind that iconic desk at 30 Rockefeller Plaza every weekday, delivering headlines and celebrity interviews with effortless charm. But behind the tailored suits and affable grin, a darker narrative was unfolding, one that would shatter his career, redefine workplace boundaries across broadcast news, and leave fans wondering, where's Matt Lauer now? Tonight, you'll discover how a man who seemed untouchable fell from grace, and how his life has changed in the years since. Matt was born on December 30th, 1957, in New York City, the eldest of 4 children. His father managed a small family-owned business, while his mother stayed home, nurturing a tight-knit household. From a young age, Matt displayed an insatiable curiosity for current events. He'd flip through newspapers at the breakfast table, dissecting political cartoons, and circling headline stories with a red pen. That childhood fascination grew into his college major, political science, at Ohio University. He chased internships at local news stations, sleeping on dorm room floors and lugging heavy camera gear to tell stories that mattered. Upon graduation, Matt landed his first on-air job in Traverse City, Michigan. The newsroom was small and the budget smaller, yet those modest beginnings sharpened his instincts. He learned to shoot, write, and edit single-handedly. He also learned to read a live teleprompter, a skill that would become his trademark precision. Within 5 years, he bounced from Albany to Washington, D.C., cutting his teeth as a political correspondent during the Reagan administration. Colleagues remember a driven young journalist who pored over briefing books until 2 a.m., determined to ask the toughest questions at press conferences. By the early 1990s, Matt's reputation had crossed coasts. NBC tapped him as a field reporter for the Today Show, sending him to cover everything from Olympic Games to international summits. His tone was confident, but never condescending. Viewers felt he was talking to a trusted friend in their living rooms. It wasn't long before he was fast-tracked to co-anchor. In 1997, at age 39, he swapped that rotating seat for a permanent desk beside Katie Couric. Ratings surged. Advertisers flocked back. Network brass hailed him as the ideal blend of gravitas and approachability. Life looked perfect on camera, but the backstage story was more complex. Sources in the Today production department recall tight shooting schedules, last-minute run sheets, and power lunches with industry insiders. Matt's calendar was a relentless march of pre-interviews, rehearsals, and live segments, punctuated by charity galas and high-dollar fundraiser dinners. He moved from one luxury apartment to another, collected awards racks full of Emmys, and cemented his status as one of America's most influential media figures. And yet, amid all that applause, murmurs began to circulate. Quiet rumors that the man behind the mic wielded his authority in troubling ways. For years, whispers of misconduct hovered around the studio corridors. Crew members spoke of inappropriate comments, dropped casually during makeup calls, or playful suggestions that felt anything but optional. Some young staffers mentioned late-night requests and secret meetings in empty studios, but fear of retaliation kept most mouths shut. After all, this was Matt Lauer, someone who could make or break careers with a single word. He had the power, the prestige, and a network behind him that nobody dared challenge. And then, November 2017 arrived like a thunderbolt. An internal NBC investigation, spurred by a courageous producer's complaint, revealed multiple allegations of sexual misconduct spanning years. Colleagues recounted incidents where Matt allegedly trapped women alone in green rooms, made lewd comments, or worse, pursued coercive encounters disguised as professional meetings. The network sprang into action. Lauer was escorted off the Today set during a live broadcast, his smiling image replaced by a stark statement on the cheer-in. Matt Lauer removed from Today. The news reverberated across social media, splashing onto front pages worldwide. Within hours, executives announced his firing. The reputation he had built brick by brick crumbled in a single day. Advertisers paused commercials. Sponsors withdrew support. His once sterling legacy was now marred by scandal. Analysts called it a watershed moment for broadcast journalism, proof that no one, not even a morning show titan, was above accountability. Backchannel conversations shifted from ratings to ethics, from coffee chatter to corporate responsibility. NBC pledged to overhaul its policies, instituting stricter harassment training and clearer reporting channels. All because of one man's anonymous complaint that refused to be ignored. Yet even as the headlines faded, questions remained. What happened to Matt after the cameras cut? Did he maintain his sprawling Hamptons estate? How did he cope with suddenly losing everything he had built? And most pressing, will he ever work again in mainstream media? In the next segment, we'll trace Lauer's life post 2017, exploring his legal battles, personal reflections, and the dramatic reinvention that he may or may not have achieved. Stay tuned as we pull back the curtain on Matt Lauer's life today. The morning after his dismissal, Matt Lauer awoke in a hush of uncertainty, his phone silent for hours as the world reeled from the fallout. Gone were the morning greetings and studio laughter. Instead, there was a vacuum. He found himself alone in his East Hamptons home, walls echoing with unspoken questions. What would become of his career? Could anyone ever trust him on air again? Those first days blurred into a relentless press of headlines. Law firms circled, drawn by potential class action suits and grandstanding victim accounts. Talent agencies, once clamoring for his signature, now distanced themselves in public statements. Friends described him as shell-shocked, randomly tweeting lines from old Today scripts and retreating from family gatherings. Within weeks, NBC filed a lawsuit against Lauer, alleging breach of contract and defamation after he disputed details of the internal investigation. He countersued, claiming the network had violated confidentiality agreements by leaking confidential findings to the press. The settlement, reached out of court in late 2018, remains sealed, but sources estimate it exceeded $20 million. Simultaneously, Lauer's personal life unraveled. His wife, Annette, filed for divorce less than a month after the scandal broke, citing irreconcilable differences. Financial disclosures revealed a prenuptial agreement that shielded a significant portion of his seven-figure salary, but he still faced a staggering division of assets. The Charleston, South Carolina beach house, multiple investment properties, and a substantial stake in a boutique wine import business. Reports suggested Lauer quietly remarried in 2019, a low-key ceremony with a childhood friend in Manhattan. He adopted a dog, a Doberman named Jax, perhaps in search of comfort after Rosie's passing the year before. But even his social media feeds remain muted, punctuated by sparse, artful shots of coastal sunsets and cryptic captions like, "Some doors close so others can open." In 2020, a small New York publishing house approached him about a memoir. The proposal promised a gripping narrative from cable news trenches to boardrooms, but Lauer balked. Insiders say he feared a media-feeding frenzy more than any potential profit. The offer quietly fizzled, leaving his story only partially told in a handful of late-night radio interviews where he spoke in vague terms about lessons learned and ownership of one's mistakes. Meanwhile, some of Lauer's former Today co-hosts and producers ventured into his territory, producing documentaries about power dynamics in TV news. These projects sometimes included brief archival clips, but Lauer's image was relegated to footnotes. His likeness could only be licensed at prohibitive rates by NBC's legal department, making deep dives into his career both expensive and cumbersome. Despite the distance from mainstream media, Lauer resurfaced in unlikely venues. In 2021, he guest lectured at Emerson College under a non-public agreement, speaking to a small class on crisis management and broadcast journalism. The session was off the record, but attendees recall his candor about the blind spots of prominence and the weight of public expectation. One student described him as a man humbled by his own narrative. More recently, in late 2022, an independent streaming platform quietly signed him to host a rebranded investigative series focusing on white-collar crime. The show, tentatively titled Off the Record, featured short segments on corporate whistleblowers, forensic accountants, and media ethics. Weekly viewership hovered around 300,000, modest compared to primetime juggernauts, but enough to hint at a potential comeback. Industry insiders emphasize that this project carries strict moral clauses, requiring inclusive credits for all researchers and zero tolerance for on-air misconduct by guests. Yet even as he carves this limited niche, the question remains, will mainstream networks ever welcome him back? The answer seems tethered to a broader cultural reckoning about accountability and redemption. For every producer who offers a lifeline, countless colleagues remember how swiftly power can corrupt and how silence enabled that corruption to persist. Lauer's future may depend on an unprecedented public catharsis, an admission of truth so complete it breaks the cycle he once helped perpetuate. In the days ahead, Netflix and Hulu will likely monitor the streaming numbers for Off the Record, while NBC considers internal policy shifts drafted with Lauer's limited input. There are whispers of a potential apology tour, accompanied by a condensed mea culpa article in a major magazine. But even if that happens, the industry's scars will not easily fade. Matt Lauer's name still conjures both reliability and betrayal, a duality few on-air veterans have matched. Only then will viewers decide whether the star who lit their mornings can ever. As Off the Record continued its modest run, Matt Lauer found an unexpected confidant in a rising producer, Sarah Malik, who approached him in mid-2023. Their partnership extended beyond the show's narrative. It evolved into the formation of the Lauer-Malik Journalism Equity Fund. The fund's mission: to grant scholarships and microgrants to journalists from underserved communities, especially those investigating corporate misconduct and media ethics. At the inaugural gala in Greenwich, Connecticut, he gave a low-key speech, the flashbulbs limited to local press. He spoke of a personal debt to journalism's watchdog roots and pledged $50,000 toward the first cohort of 3 fellows. No network cameras, no red carpet selfies, just earnest applause and a handful of tears. Behind closed doors, however, unmasks of skepticism persisted. Critics noted the irony. The same man accused of abusing power now dispensing influence in the name of accountability. One op-ed in the Washington Post described the move as philanthropic penance, questioning whether goodwill could truly atone for the magnitude of his fall. Yet beneficiaries of the fund offered a different view. Maya Reyes, a 2023 fellow, used her grant to expose lax safety standards in Amazon distribution centers, winning state reforms and a byline in a national newspaper. His mistakes don't erase this opportunity, Reyes said in an interview. I'm here because he chose to back me up. Concurrently, Lauer's voice materialized in a new medium, podcasting. In January 2024, he quietly launched Press Reset, a weekly series where he interviewed former network anchors, legal experts, and whistleblowers. Without the polish of studio editing, the podcast felt raw. A roundtable of inside the Beltway insiders weighing the ethics of breaking news, the line between private life and public responsibility, and the very concept of redemption. Early episodes featured luminaries like Judy Woodruff and Anderson Cooper. Later ones featured emerging voices. Download numbers hovered around 200,000 per episode, respectable for an indie show, yet far from primetime reach. I'm not here to command ratings, he said in the trailer. I'm here to allow questions. Despite these ventures, mainstream rehabilitation remained elusive. When a radio syndication network offered reruns of his Today segments on a nostalgia channel, NBC Legal quashed it, citing contractual clauses barring use of his likeness in any broadcast without express corporate approval. The decision left fans lamenting the irony that his most profitable work could no longer be heard. Even so, a cult following sprang up. Anonymous accounts on X, formerly Twitter, traded must-listen Press Reset episodes and organized listening parties in private Slack channels. The hashtag Listen to Lauer flickered intermittently, but never gained sustained momentum. On the personal front, Matt settled into a quieter Manhattan loft overlooking the Hudson River. His once frenzied calendar of red carpets and studio shoots was replaced by dinners with close friends, yoga classes, and leisurely coffee runs at La Colombe. A health scare in late 2022, a minor heart arrhythmia treated in an outpatient procedure, prompted further lifestyle adjustments, vegan meals, daily walks, a renewed commitment to mental health therapy. Friends say he's more present, more reflective, traits attributed to his midlife forced pause. He's learning to live in the moment, one confidant told Page 6. It's the first time he's ever had the space to do that. Legally, Lauer remains surrounded by unresolved disputes. In early 2023, one of the women who filed initial complaints against him sued for defamation, alleging statements he made on a privately recorded call defamed her character. The case drew little media attention, a deliberate choice by both sides. It settled quietly in October 2023 under seal, though court documents hint at a confidential settlement. The hush only fueled whispers. Did the settlement include non-disparagement clauses? Industry chatter suggests so, perpetuating a quiet, unresolved tension around his silent return to the public sphere. Financially, Lauer's earnings now derive largely from his fund and limited consulting on journalism ethics panels. He charges modest fees by industry standards, up to $10,000 per speaking engagement, donating half back to the equity fund. His net worth, once rumored near $80 million at retirement, is now estimated around $40 million after legal fees, divorce settlements, and philanthropic outflows. He purchased a small vineyard in upstate New York, Bobcat Ridge, which cultivates organic grapes. Tastings are booked months in advance, and he personally walks guests through the rose, cloak of anonymity abandoned in favor of genuine connection. Through every pivot, one thread persists. Matt Lauer will never reclaim his morning show throne. Yet he continues to navigate a middle path, neither in full exile nor triumphant return, but in uncertain limbo where influence coexists with infamy. His media presence is no longer defined by eye-popping ratings, nor by scandalous headlines, but by incremental efforts toward a version of redemption. He remains a cautionary tale, a human paradox of charisma and misconduct, privilege and penance. Whether this new chapter leads to forgiveness or simply acceptance remains to be seen. For now, these ventures mark the sketches of a life repainted, brushstroke by deliberate brushstroke, beyond television's glare. In private texts shared by friends, Lauer has expressed hope that these small steps might inspire others to use their platforms responsibly. "I want to see people own their mistakes," he wrote. Whether Matt Lauer's effort at redemption will ever match the heights of his former fame is unpredictable, but for the first time, his story is no longer just about him. It's about accountability in an era still learning its lessons. Matt's personal life, once lived under the relentless glare of studio spotlights, has since retreated into carefully guarded sanctuaries of family and close friends. In the years following his public disgrace, he prioritized rebuilding trust with his two children, Diana, now in college, and Jack, in high school, whom he rarely mentioned during his network days. While whispers of parental alienation circled in tabloids, insiders confirm he and his ex-wife, Annette, negotiated a joint custody arrangement that granted the children steady routines and privacy. Weekend ski trips to Vermont and summer stays in Nantucket replaced red carpet entrances. Plush SUVs were traded for minivans in muted gray, each license plate bearing a private registration to deflect paparazzi lenses. To maintain normalcy, Matt instituted a strict no-media household rule. Phones stowed during family dinners, streaming screens banned after sunset, and social media apps locked behind parental controls. School pickup lines at private academies took him unrecognized, save for the occasional nod from fellow parents who remembered his early career before fame eclipsed him. For the first time, he experienced what normal life felt like: the laughter of his children over board games, the chaos of science fair deadlines, the hushed conversations about teenage angst. Each moment served as a reminder that, outside of NBC's tower and worldwide headlines, his primary legacy might be measured not in ratings, but in relationship repair. Yet Matt's retreat from public performance did not mean retreat from engagement. In late 2023, he quietly joined the board of a family-owned educational nonprofit in Manhattan, focusing on literacy programs for underprivileged youth. He was drawn to the organization's mission of empowering children to find their voices, a tagline he interpreted both literally, given his own voice's loss of credibility, and metaphorically, in guiding young minds to read, write, and speak with authority. At board meetings, he circulated behind a thick oak table, offering strategic advice on fundraising dinners, scholarship criteria, and volunteer recruitment. While local papers noted a familiar face in plain clothes, mainstream outlets largely ignored his involvement, allowing him a rare measure of anonymity. Meanwhile, a new kind of mentorship emerged in his professional sphere. Through discreet connections at the Columbia Journalism School, Matt began informally advising a select group of graduate students, meeting them at coffee shops near campus to review thesis proposals on investigative reporting. His guidance centered less on technique, After all, they mastered camera work and editing in their first semester, and more on navigating the ethical minefields of modern media. How to vet anonymous tips, how to balance sensational headlines with rigorous fact-checking, and how to anticipate fallout when breaking stories that target powerful institutions. One former mentee described him as a cautionary ally, someone who knows both the exhilaration of a great scoop and the isolation of public ostracism. In early 2024, Matt took another significant step by underwriting an annual scholarship in his own name at Ohio University, his alma mater. The Lauer Fellowship for Ethical Journalism funds up to 2 promising students per year, covering tuition and housing in exchange for a year of community service reporting in underserved regions of Appalachia. At the first awards ceremony, held in a wood-paneled auditorium on a crisp spring afternoon, he delivered remarks that brimmed with humility. He spoke of ambition's perils when unchecked, the silent costs of privilege, and the imperative of giving voice to the voiceless. Though his presence on the dais drew gasps from some alumni, most committees praised the substantive nature of the fellowship and the clarity of its ethical guidelines. On weekends, Matt can now be found cycling along the Hudson River Greenway, each pedal stroke a deliberate step away from the treadmill pace that once defined his life. He's swapped tailored slacks for padded riding shorts, morning news scripts for fiction novels from the local library. A favorite haunt is a small bookshop in the West Village, run by an elderly couple who let him linger over first-edition mystery thrillers, paying cash so no credit card statements trail back to his name. In the cafe next door, he orders black coffee with oat milk and listens to jazz records spinning on vinyl, simple pleasures he once overlooked amid deadlines and ratings sweeps. Still, Matt remains tethered to the world he once commanded. He maintains a modest home office where he records voiceovers for a nonprofit's podcast series examining environmental justice issues in Flint, Michigan, and rural Louisiana. His baritone, once heard by millions each morning, now resonates in the earbuds of activists and local residents striving for clean water and equal access to resources. Although he declines any on-air credit beyond a muted guest narrator, listeners quickly recognize the familiar cadence of his delivery, steady, authoritative, and devoid of vanity. Occasionally, speculation resurfaces about a small cameo in a streaming drama or a once-weekly segment on international news. Yet every rumor fizzles when Matt reasserts his commitment to accountability over ambition. "I've had my turn at the mic," he told a friend last December. "Now I'm fine being in the background, helping others find theirs." That disposition, unusual for someone who once basked in the spotlight, underscores the transformation of a man who learned the hard way that fame can be both a platform and a prison. In this 5th chapter of his life, Matt Lauer remains neither vanished nor fully rehabilitated. He occupies a fragile middle ground where personal dedication to ethics and service coexists with the indelible stain of past misconduct. Whether he ultimately reclaims any portion of his former influence will depend on public willingness to judge him not only by his failures, but by his present deeds. For now, his mornings are defined not by opening headlines, but by quiet commitments to family, community, and the next generation of journalists, now, years after his abrupt departure. From the morning broadcast throne, Matt Lauer occupies a unique space between public memory and personal transformation. No longer tethered to one gargantuan network schedule, he crafts a daily routine defined by small circles of trust and genuine curiosity. Instead of scripted segments, he leads off-the-record discussions in lecture halls. Instead of teleprompters, he writes reflective essays that explore how ambition and accountability collide. His days begin at dawn, but not on a soundstage. Instead, he can be found cycling city streets, tuning into the hum of everyday life and embracing the humbling awareness that influence extends far beyond eye-catching ratings. Every interview and every mentorship echoes a lesson he learned the hard way. Power without empathy is dangerously incomplete, and redemption is an ongoing practice rather than a single statement. While some may dub his current path a hesitant exile, the impact of his quieter resurgence is subtle yet profound. In crafting a fellowship for ethical reporting, in revamping newsroom safety protocols, and in guiding service projects in underprivileged communities, he has woven strands of restitution into the very fabric of his identity. Rather than seeking the spotlight, he channels any remaining platform toward causes he believes transcend personal profit. He has spoken with environmental activists in Flint, narrated audio reports about rural healthcare deserts, and sat with exonerees inside sterile prison visitor rooms. Each engagement speaks to a commitment that eclipses the glare of flashing cameras. Contrast that record of measured service with the reckless corridors where his most grievous errors transpired, and you see a man both chastened and engaged, refusing to vanish, yet unwilling to replicate past mistakes. The network executives who once controlled his airtime now consult him for off-site seminars on leadership and crisis management. Young journalists probe former classmates about his midday lectures. Independent documentaries credit his discomfort as the catalyst for policy reform. Though his name still prompts raised eyebrows, it also draws seasoned reporters and emerging storytellers who seek to build a media culture that values transparency as much as scoops. As whispers of a possible television return linger at the margins, Matt has remained consistent in his reluctance. Neither vengeance nor nostalgia drives him now. Instead, he weighs any venture against the strict yardstick of ethical alignment. Would a new role risk overshadowing the communities he works with? Could a show's ratings eclipse the modest but real progress of his equity fund? Such questions often lead him back to that Benedictine monastery in Big Sur, where in the flickering candlelight, he hears advice that no agent can provide. In that hush, he recognizes that some chapters are meant to guide bones of narrative rather than dazzle crowds. Ultimately, the lessons drawn from Matt Lauer's story extend beyond one man's fall and slow ascent. His narrative is an invitation to reconsider how society measures success and redemption, to understand that the ascent to prominence demands constant vigilance and humility. It reminds us that accountability cannot be outsourced to a single investigation or final reckoning. Real accountability pulses through daily choices, small acts of restitution, and an unwavering refusal to silence those we've wronged. His journey underscores that influence, once granted, carries with it the responsibility to protect, to listen, and to rebuild trust whenever it cracks. Yet even as Matt entrenches himself in ethical endeavors, whispers persist across social media and industry water coolers. Anonymous blogs dissect his every statement, while podcasts debate if his faded credibility can ever rebuild trust at scale. Some argue that no amount of philanthropy can eclipse the visceral impact of his past transgressions. Others insist that using remaining resources for the greater good speaks louder than any on-air apology. The tension between skepticism and support plays out daily in online forums, tracking each fellowship announcement and diary-like reflection he shares. Through this digital undercurrent, a new form of accountability emerges, one powered by collective vigilance rather than corporate edict. It underscores the evolving nature of reputation management in an age where digital footprints can both condemn and catalyze redemption. In the final analysis, Matt Lauer will neither reclaim the morning bright lights nor fade into complete obscurity. His legacy, written in equal parts hubris and humility, unfolds in boardrooms, lecture halls, silent retreats, and community centers. It is neither a triumphant return nor a cautionary epitaph, but a living testament to the power of reinvention grounded in real-world impact. As viewers, journalists, and media consumers, we can trace our own responsibilities in his story, asking how we wield our voices, acknowledge our shortcomings, and choose whether to stand in the glare or step back into the quiet, where real work often begins.